Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name. And your own future.
Decide for myself?
And whatever you choose will be you.
I don't know if I can.
Muslims were here far before 9/11. Far before those two towers fell. And far before we were ever called terrorists.
Islamic terrorism because we do not want to offend anybody, we do not want to hurt anybody. Well, it's time to throw political correctness in the garbage because right now...
Some say the first wave of Muslims came to this continent as enslaved Africans. Others recall a secondary wave where Muslims were explorers, fur traders, and settlers. But in recent memory, Muslims, Christians from the Middle East, and South Asians have all been categorized as immigrants by the immigrants of North America. Words
Don't obsess over words so much.
began to have new meanings. Identities mattered to those living in a white supremacist society. But simultaneously, the words, the identities that were brought over to these foreign lands seemed to matter even more to Arabs, Muslims, and Christian immigrants. For all could be lost, and these new lands were filled with strangers who gazed onto Arabs, forcing some to change their names and blend into the population. Others began building mosques, where Muslims began to gather, and over time, communities formed. These communities became safe haven for new arrivals, and parents who were afraid of the temptations of the West began to pass on whatever knowledge they could about Islam and Arab culture to their children. Thus, from an early age, second-generation Muslims were taught about what the Ajanib do in the haram nature of the West. However, the terrorist attacks committed on September the 11th, 2001 changed this simple teaching, as Muslim children who grew up at the height of the Islamophobia that preceded 9/11 had to face a dire question and a confusing predicament. Should they give in to the temptation, assimilate and drink, and have premarital sex, and be normal, be as white as possible? Or should they stand apart and be Muslim, be marked with difference, with strangeness, as they walk in a land where they are marked with giant targets on their back, forever questioning their identity, their place in society, and some became lost. It becomes a struggle because the easy choice is there, to give it all up, to give into temptation, to fit in, to be white. But to do that, one would have to give it all. So let me tell you of a TV show that answers these very questions, and it's called Hey, is this the Colonel?
No, I think you got the wrong person, guy.
Then who is this?
I'm Oddnon.
Welcome to the channel, Adnan. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Can you tell me how things changed since 9/11?
Ooh, like for me personally?
Yeah. Personally, or environmentally, or culturally, anything.
Well, I mean, it's a complicated question because I wasn't there for all of it, if that makes any sense. All I know is, like, it wasn't really that big of a deal that I was Syrian until the towers fell. And then all of a sudden, you know, people were asking about my name and my family name and, you know, where I come from, did I immigrate here? And these were people that had known me for years and years and years and years. You know, so it was just like a weird, like, all of a sudden, like, I was totally fine, and then all of a sudden, I was suspect, despite these people knowing me.
Yeah. So he basically became almost like an enemy within.
I mean, I guess
to a degree.
Yeah, that's kind of how it presents itself. Is like you get seen as sort of like a double agent. You know, people get really angry if you appear white, and then they find out that you're not the brand of white that they, you know, you're not like European white. They go, "Oh God, you're an Arab," and then that becomes, you know, problematic.
In the 21 years, have things gotten better? Have things gotten worse? What do you think?
I mean, I don't want to say it's gotten better, but it also doesn't seem to have gotten substantially worse. I mean, that's not even quite accurate. It's just I don't feel as scared anymore. You know, if people, you know, ask me about myself and things like that, I include my identity because it's just part of who I am. As to where even just 10 years ago, I would have glossed over it entirely. So, but my particular lived experience is also strange because I get to blend in if I choose to. Nobody's gonna bat an eye at me, you know. I'm a big fat white guy with a big beard.
Yeah. In the first 3 minutes of the first episode, Ramy is asked a question almost every Muslim has to confront.
بدك تعيش حياة حرام ولا حلال؟
حلال؟
اللي سويته غلط.
Listen, man, I don't know what you're talking about. I just...
كاتب لنا نتواجه مع بعض.
Muslims like Ramy who participate in Friday prayers and have Muslim friends are sometimes reminded daily of this dichotomic life. However, to live the ideal halal life is a struggle for Ramy and also Muslims who live in North America, because there is an option to steer away from the rigid rules of the Islamic society. This is shown clearly in the first episode as Ramy tells his friends that he has been seeing a girl named Chloe.
I don't have to find a Muslim girl, alright? Yeah. I've actually been seeing this girl, Chloe, for a little bit, and it's...
And they respond with,
No! Are you out of your mind? She must be. Girls suck, bro. You can't keep dating them. One, they're always walking around barefoot. That's great. They have no morals. No morals. And they're always jumping in stuff that's none of their business, man.
The scene in the mosque is then perfectly juxtaposed by Ramy having sex. And to many Muslims, this is considered haram since it is premarital. However, Ramy does something that indicates that he is very conscious about his actions as he checks if the condom has any holes. He gets caught by Chloe and she discovers that Ramy isn't culturally Muslim, but rather Muslim.
No, like you're Muslim, I thought, in the way that I'm Jewish, like it's a cultural thing. I didn't know that you were Muslim.
The viewer then finds out that although Ramy participates in drink culture, he doesn't drink.
Yeah.
You drink. Religious Muslims don't drink.
I actually don't drink.
The other night we were out of the bar and you bought the entire table drinks.
Yeah, but mine was a Coke.
And so, throughout season 1, the viewer watches Ramy struggle with his faith and walk on a tightrope between the haram and the halal. as in that very first episode, he gets hooked up with a Muslim girl, and the viewer gets to experience peak awkwardness.
So, have you lived in Jersey your whole life?
No. You're here for her, not me.
This is Ramy doing dating the halal way, and in his mind it would be a normal first date, until the second he gets pulled into a car with her and starts to make out when the girl demands to be choked, bringing Ramy back to reality. And on the threshold of the haram, Ramy is then kicked out of the car and he stumbles into that grumpy old man who first asked that question. Ramy tells the man,
I don't know what I'm doing, man. Like, I look at my parents and how strong they are and how they just know everything's gonna be okay, always, because they have God.
encapsulating how lost he is, but also the feelings many second generation Muslims who live in North America feel.
And yeah, I have sex even though I'm not married, and I'm probably gonna try mushrooms one day. So what? That means I'm not a good Muslim?
To me, there are three things that make up the show's thesis. The first being the halal versus haram question. The second is Ramy's struggle to find halal love. And the third, and most vital, is being lost. But on the flip side, there are many temptations Ramy faces. This temptation reaches both spiritual levels, but also simply being in the West. Because there is a temptation to assimilate and do things that are normal in the West, such as having premarital sex, eating pork, going to Christmas dinners, and doing juices. All of these things are marked as haram in Islam, but they also perform as different markers to white people. Here's an example. When a Muslim tells a white person that they do not drink or they do not celebrate Christmas, this instantaneously marks one as different and outside the norms of white Christian society. These difference markers further aid the already existing white gaze. Hence, there is a temptation to just give in and remove these difference markers in order to fit in and to be as white as possible. This is masterfully shown through Ramy's dad later in the show, where when he first arrived in this foreign land, he worked as a bartender. He also changes his name from Farouk to Frank when he is around white people, as is shown in the dinner scene where his boss calls him Frank and invites him to drink.
So, Frank, did you and your wife meet back in Egypt?
No, sir. Actually, we...
Wait, you guys good for whiskey?
Oh, thank you. We do.
Sure. Just one for me.
One for you, one for Pops over here.
Farouk does drink the juice, but it's like one big gulp, showcasing he's only really doing it to try and be normal. Why did Farouk give into temptation and attempt to erase the difference markers around him? The answer is survival.
Survival.
And this survival existed before 9/11, but 9/11 sure did amplify it. These difference markers after 9/11 gave Americans pause, as not engaging in normal American culture othered Muslims, backing the idea of the enemy within. To survive in a world where Muslims became public enemy number one, Muslims had to wear a mask around white people and act normal and show America that they were part of it and not alien to it. Ramy showcases the white gaze on Muslims and how Muslims reacted to 9/11 in the episode Strawberries.
I love strawberries.
This episode is my all-time favorite because we jump to Ramy's childhood and we see where his addiction to masturbation began. Okay, so this is contested. Yeah, Ramy jerks off a lot in season 2, but he's not addicted to pornography. Rather, the root issue that this episode points at is how alienated Ramy is from these white boys. Like, he walks with them to school, but he doesn't feel like he belongs. And so Ramy here thinks he found a way in. Jerking off. So he lies about jerking off 6 times to impress them to escape alienation. The lack of honesty, which I'll point to later in this video, can thus be traced back to this moment, to this lie. It began because his white friends were parading that they masturbated. They then ask Ramy, and Ramy doesn't have a clue of what they're talking about. Although it's a silly thing to focus on, Ramy is marked as different because he lies and tells these white boys he did it 6 times. However, by not engaging in masturbation practices and not even knowing what it is, he feels different or alien. And then in class, 9/11 happens. Ramy walks in and the white gaze instantly lands on him. It amplifies when his mother calls him through a radio talking in Arabic. Let's pause here because the subtitles don't translate what the parents are saying. The mom is worried about Ramy. But the dad is in total shock, saying, and then saying, Allah protect them, not us. Because the word hum should get translated to them. In translating it properly, the show is showing and conveying genuine shock and horror. It's a second, but it conveys the feelings most Muslims had on that day. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend Todd Green's book on Islamophobia, Khalid Beydoun's book, and any article written by Tahir Abbas. The next day, Ramy's dad notices the white gaze his neighbors have been flashing him, causing him to hoist an American flag to show his patriotism. I also love the conversation the parents have in Arabic in the background. Some good benefits if you know your Arabic, because again, the subtitles miss a key word. Farouk says, Abussu.
The way they are looking at us. شفتي بيبصوا علينا ازاي؟
انت موهوم.
ماشي موهوم.
Meaning they are gazing or looking. Anyways, a week after 9/11, we see Ramy walking to school with his white friends. And one of them asks him, "Are you a terrorist?"
Yeah. What's up? Are you a terrorist?
Now, this is a question hundreds of kids have been asked, and it's a question I have been asked when I was called into the office on December 12, 2012. The school day passes, and one of the wildest moments in TV history happens. Osama bin Laden appears in Ramy's kitchen eating strawberries. Now, there's a lot going on in the scene, but at its core, it shows Ramy rejecting Osama's ideology. Because although, yes, the USA did exploit Egypt and is taking its strawberries, yes, the Middle East is weak because of colonialism and imperialism that ravaged those lands. But Angela's mom still died.
But what about Angela's mom?
But Osama still asks a very interesting question.
How do you feel here? In New Jersey, America? Do you ever feel like you don't belong?
In Osama's view, a Muslim cannot be a dual being who can live between worlds, but rather that they are out of place and only truly belong or can be in their native country.
That is because you, Ramy Hassan, don't belong here. You can hear it in your name, can't you?
However, I have to say, Osama bin Laden is wrong. This is the part of the video where I dunk on Osama bin Laden. Okay, so here it is. It's 2010, the Arab Spring is brewing online, and I was a lad, maybe 12, I don't know, it's not very important how old I was. I traveled through the valleys of Lebanon to my mother's native village, and I sure did not feel like I was home. I felt out of place, too Canadian, not Arab enough. The other half of the trip, I visited Damascus, and I slept on the mountain my great Circassian grandfather settled on. Damascus was beautiful. You could feel the history, but it also felt oppressed, as if I was under the watchful eye of Bashar al-Ahmar. Even in the historic city, the city of my father, the city of my grandfather, and one of the oldest cities in the entire world, I, however, did not feel like I was home. My home was in the frozen plains of Canada, and when I was in the Middle East, I missed it. I missed the cold. So it's funny when Osama tells Ramy that he belongs in Egypt, because if you take an American or a Canadian Muslim and place them in the Middle East, they will not feel like they belong and will feel foreign in their own land. However, with the bigger picture in mind, Muslims living in the West have to continuously evade the assumption that they are by default terrorists. This tension in identity can be traced throughout Season 1, and Ramy, the character, is continuously trying to figure things out, but he never comes to an answer.
You know, I'm kind of trying to figure it out. I feel like the problem's really that I just don't know what kind of Muslim I am. Like, there's Friday prayers, and then there's Friday night at both. You know, like I want to pray, I want to go to the party, and I'm breaking some rules, I'm following others.
In one of his attempts to find a path, to find clarity, he ventures to Egypt, but things get muddy. What is clear is that the answer the show is trying to provide is not to give into the temptation, and that the struggle Muslims face when it comes to their identity is complex. This struggle often leads one to seek the Muslim community. Have you ever felt the temptation to hide your Arab or Muslim identity to fit in after 9/11?
I mean, yeah.
Can you explain methods that you've done it? And why?
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I've always lived between both of those worlds, and they never really crossed. Because, you know, my parents they separated when I was very, very young. And so when I went over to my one parent's house, my father's house, it was very, you know, I was in the faith, Muslim, praying, reading, you know, with my Arabic family and his Arabic friends. And it was like very immersive, you know? And then when I was with my mom, it was much the same, but my mom is not religious. You know, never really tried to force me one way or the other. Just told me to do whatever I felt was right. I had always kind of walked between those worlds, and they always were so separate that I never felt the need to express one more than the other. They were just intertwined in a way that was part of who I was. Once 9/11 hit and everything, I was in middle school. I think I was in 7th grade. And it became, everyone was panicked. Nobody knew what was going on. I was at school. And they locked the school down, you know. And it became, that's a whole, I can get into that another time because it's a whole gnarly day on its own, but it was more that suddenly I had to choose. And I hadn't explored enough of either. Plus, being a young teenager, I hadn't explored enough of either to effectively be able to make a decision. So I had to think for myself.
Yeah.
What's the path of least resistance? What's going to make things a lot easier for me to survive?
Yeah.
And it was basically adopting, a white facing sort of thing. And so I'd still go to my father's and everything would be much the same. Celebrating Eid and all the pulling out all the stops. But you were definitely made to feel that there was a shame to it. And I don't think anybody did it. I've ran into a few, I've had weird run-ins when I'm with my Arabic family of like genuine racism or snide or off-color comments from like a teacher or something like that. But it was never like it became much more overt. And whether people meant to or not, there was just this air of shame in being both.
That's a good point. I don't touch
because it meant you weren't dedicated to either.
Yeah, that's a great.
And they don't want you playing for two. They don't want you playing for two teams.
No, that's a great point. The shame. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, you roll out your rug to start praying, and the whole time you're just thinking like, I'd find myself closing the blinds. My bedroom at my dad's house was a second floor bedroom. Nobody could see in, and yet I would close the blinds when I prayed because I had some weird idea that maybe somebody would like catch me. And it was an unfounded fear, but it really does feel that way. My dad makes excellent food. He's a chef, and he makes excellent Arabic food. And he would, give me like these big tubs of hummus and khibz and
good stuff,
zatar and all that stuff. And he'd be like, "Here you go. You have lunch for a week." And I remember just because everything was so much. And maybe this is too much of a personal story, but I remember being so excited to take hummus to school because it's my favorite. It still is. And I got up in the morning and I went to take it and put it because he'd give me these giant ass tubs.
I know the tub.
Yeah, exactly. Then. And I was scooping some into like a Tupperware and, ripping the bread up so I could fit it into a lunch bag. And I just started crying because, I'm like 12 or 13. I'm not like a baby. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with crying,
100%.
But it just hit me that this was like secret hummus. Like I couldn't take it to school because then kids would ask about it and I don't know what to say. I wasn't able to, sharing food with people. It's such a deep part of most cultures, but especially in Arabic culture, that's like such a connection thing. And I was upset because I couldn't share I'm like tearing up almost right now, is I just remember the shame and the guilt and the fear of like wanting to be able to share this with my friends, like at the lunch table. And I just couldn't because it was literally just dangerous. There are so many, until you started working on this video, there's a lot of that stuff that I just hadn't thought that much about. So I started just thinking about like, what do I even remember about those times, you know? And I was the only Arab kid in my school. And I look, like you've seen me stream.
Yeah, I've seen you.
I don't think you could clock me,
Yeah.
Just walking around. But because kids had that knowledge, anytime there was a bomb threat, I would get called to the office. Or kids would like make fun of me saying that I was obviously the one who did it.
We had that in our high school too. It was December 12th.
Oh, really?
It was 12/12/2012, which is the end of the world day. Like it was
Oh
known
wow.
as the end of the world day, if you remember. Like the world was supposed to end on that day, right? And our high school got a bomb threat. And I finished the khutbah because I used to do the Friday prayer in our school. Uh, I had a
Mhm.
really cool history teacher who let me use his classroom. So I finished the khutbah, finished the prayer, and next thing you know, bam, there's my name on the intercom.
Oh my
They're all
god.
and my students are like, "Oh, you're in trouble, man." And I'm like, "But yeah, but I didn't do anything. Like we just prayed. Like I don't remember doing anything at all." They're like
Yeah.
"Nope, you probably you probably did something shitty." So I went to the office and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, we've received some bomb threats on Twitter, and you said something really odd to your teacher when you were leaving his classroom. Do
Yep.
you have any knowledge about this bomb threat?" And what
My
happened was
god.
that before I went to pray, I was leaving my teacher's classroom, and I farted as I was leaving. So I looked back and I was like, hey, sir, sorry about I'm so sorry." And he said, "Oh, for what?" And I was like, "Oh, you'll find out later." Implying that the
Oh.
fart is gonna reach him, and he'll
Yeah.
smell it and he'll be like, "Oh shit, the kid farted as he was leaving." So I walk into the office and and I see the teacher there, and I'm like, "Oh," and the teacher was there, so the principal's like, "Yeah, but you said something."
Oh no, and then you had to tell him that you farted? You had to
Yeah,
explain it?
so the teacher was standing beside the principal, and the principal pointed at him and was like, "You told the teacher here, Mr. H, that he'll find out later, and so he thought that you had a connection to them." And I looked at the principal. I'm like, "Oh, right. I passed gas as I was leaving, and I said sorry to him, and that he'll find out later because the gas will travel to him." And all three of these white people started laughing their asses off. And I'm like, "Oh, I guess I should have not said anything." And then I told them that I didn't have any Twitter, I don't have any connections to anything, and I didn't even know, like,
What happened?
people issue bomb threats on this day. Like, I had no knowledge that people do that, and they let me go. But, like, you know
That's hilarious. Like,
it's
it's
hilarious.
not funny, but it's pretty
It
funny.
is for me. I laugh at it, but at the same time, like I think back and I'm like, why did like this is my favorite teacher. Like he was my favorite teacher, my most trusted teacher, the guy that I walked in and I was in this poetry club. He got me into English. He got me into reading, right? Like this, he got me to teaching. Like he was like a magical teacher. And now
Yeah.
I think back to it, and I'm like, why didn't he just find me? Like, why didn't he like ask me what I meant before I left, right? Instead of
Yeah.
like running down to the office and telling
Snitch.
these people that I might have a bomb. Like I'm not the kind of person who would bomb a school. I wasn't
Right.
that kind of student. And like thinking back, it's fucked up. I'm like, wow, that guy just fucking racial profiled me. And yeah, I don't know. Things are not the same anymore. Yeah. Yeah, that's my story of
Wow.
yeah.
There were a lot of
There
twists.
was. There were. And I had them to laugh and, like calm them down. And I was a very and I still am. I'm a very like intuitive thinker. Like I'm very good at like if you put me in any situation, I'm able to think up on the spot, get my way out, and kind of make it into a comedic situation. I if it was another kid, it would have been a very different situation, I think. And like I
Sure.
think back and I'm like, okay, what about if it was somebody else that was called to the office? How would have they reacted? What would have they said?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm able to make it into a joke. I'm able to ease off the pressure and have fun with it. But like even at the moment, at the time, I was very honest, very upfront. I didn't lie or be ashamed. I was like, okay, like he wants to know, I'll tell him. But at the same time, I didn't react with anger. I didn't react with like how the fuck dare you accuse me of bombing the school when like I was a good student. Like there shouldn't be any reason to clock me into snitch on me because you should know me. You should trust me, right? Like it was like what, grade 11? Like I was in the school for like 3 years by that time, and every year I was with that teacher. So it's like I wasn't a stranger to this guy.
Right.
Yeah, anyways.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Ramy's discovery that he's a shitty person who is lost leads him to seek out religious institutions in multiple forms. In the third episode of the first season, called A Black Spot on the Heart, the viewer sees Ramy refuse to take the juice E and leave a party. He then does a very shitty thing as he steals his best friend's gummy and has an experience. However, things get worse as Ramy, under the influence, starts telling Steve's mom how bad her life is because she has to take care of Steve, saying some really dark things, like talking about Steve's funeral and how she's going to get a coffin. It's fucked up, and yes, he's under the influence, but Ramy throughout season 1 is a shit person. After this experience, Ramy enters a mosque where he finds Mark S.'s brother-in-law from the show Severance, vacuuming the masjid.
Food left.
Oh, no, sorry, bro. I don't need food.
I thought you were a homeless dude.
No.
We do our best to help them. You know the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him.
It's here where Ramy has a strange conversation with this convert who found Islam because he did not want a perfect ass.
You can have this. You can have this ass.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want it.
What?
That's when I knew I was ready to follow the path of the Prophet. PBUH.
You didn't want that ass?
I didn't want that ass.
Dude. Wow.
Anyways, the stranger offers some wisdom as he says,
It's not about adding up every good deed versus bad deed. Because if it was, none of us would have a chance. It's about your heart.
But it's about the heart and cleaning the black spots on the heart.
You know, the Prophet said the dopest thing in a hadith. When a believer commits a sin, a black spot forms on his heart.
The episode ends with Ramy cleaning and seemingly finding clarity. However, after this, Ramy goes down a downward spiral as he has sex with a married woman and gets caught by his father.
Apparently, while he is away, you have been seeing his wife, Salma. How could you do this to a married woman?
The episode ends with Ramy listening to a message his granddad mailed to his father. See, Ramy's grandpa warned Farouk about the temptations of the West and that Ramy and Dina will grow up confused because they are raised away from their roots. That in being away from their roots, they will not grow up learning Islam or finding the right path.
انت بتعمل غلطة كبيرة يا فاروق. ولادك يا فاروق. فكر في ولادك. ولادك هيكبروا متشتتين. لازم يتربوا على أسس الإسلام يا ابني. يا إما مش هيعرفوا الطريق الصحيح.
This image of the Middle East is still held by Muslim families, and I have family members who took their kids who are raised in Canada back to Syria and Lebanon, and guess what? The kids hated it. Furthermore, when I visited in 2010, me and my entire family noticed how the Middle East was not the ideal everyone says it is. What's shocking is that Muslims in the West are more hardcore religiously than the people in the Middle East. Tangents aside, so to find the so-called right path and to find clarity, Ramy ventures to Egypt. In the next episode titled, Dude, Where's My Country?, the show dispels the ideal his grandfather painted, as Ramy finds Muslim youth being far more lost than he ever was. This is shown in the scene where Ramy hears the call to prayer through a loudspeaker for the first time and tries to convince his cousin to go and pray Isha. However, Shadi shows little interest in praying and instead drags Ramy to a party he's set up, which has, and I quote, a lot of hot chicks. To my Muslim brain, this party looks hardcore, as you got a DJ, you got your booze, and a lot of juice. Also, Shadi throws the N-word around way too much.
You're my nigga, man. Alright, dude, you really gotta stop saying that. Saying what? The N-word. You can't say that shit. You can't just shout it. You realize how offensive that is to black people?
However, what this episode nails down is that the youth of Egypt are also lost. As Shadi admits here,
I'm lost, man. Everybody's lost. I'm like fucking Ashton Kutcher. But I'm like, dude, where's my country? I don't know.
After this, Ramy ventures into the very desert to seek out his grandfather, and many philosophers have stated over the centuries that one often finds clarity in the desert. But this Egyptian desert really fucks with Ramy's mind, as he runs into a talking camel who he calls Juddu.
يا حبيب جدو مش قادر استنى لحد ما اشوفك يا هموت واخدك في حضني تاني يا رب.
Once he meets his real grandpa, Ramy tells him that he's there for answers, and one may expect that this old, wise man to say something about the right path he spoke about, but Ramy's Juddu passes away, and he's unable to part any wisdom or give Ramy any clarity. The one who gives Ramy a bit of clarity was his cousin, who took him to a Sufi gathering. Now, small note to this, Ramy is a Sunni Muslim, so this was quite an experience, and I think the show did a really good job showing this different form of worship. However, this moment gets screwed up as Ramy kisses his cousin. The show then transitions into a season 2, and the viewers meet a Ramy who is desperate to redeem himself because he didn't just kiss his cousin, but rather, he fucked her.
You want to know? I went to Egypt and then I fucked my cousin.
What is apparent throughout the second season of Ramy is that he doesn't face his inner demons, but rather relies on a sheikh to relinquish them for him.
But that would be easy as your teacher, to hand me your pain, asking me to take it away, be the solution to your problems, relieving you of having to deal with yourself.
Ramy gets introduced to the Sufi sheikh through the convert who told him about the black spots on one's heart. And Mashira Ali, the actor who plays Sheikh Ali, does an amazing job showing patience, but also a level of annoyance towards Ramy. For an example, Ramy finds an unhoused person in Mo's shop and wants to help him by bringing him to the center. This action is in good faith, until the man hears the adhan and his PTSD flares up, making him admit that he killed Muslims during a war.
I was over in fucking Iraq. I fucking killed my G, man. I killed him. I went into that building and I just started fucking firing, man. You just start fucking firing.
Now, Ramy's contract with the sheikh is one of honesty, yet Ramy omits the convert's problems and wins the sheikh's admiration. However, Ramy's lack of honesty comes at a price, as the unhoused person converts to Islam, and during a prayer, his PTSD flares up again, which motivates him to beat up an Islamophobic protester to near death.
When I first told Ramy about everything that happened over in Iraq, he said, don't say nothing, but the people that I hurt.
Hence, through Ramy's actions, one can see that he is in fact using Islam to relinquish his demons, but not through working through his problems, but in the hopes that the Sheikh would magically relinquish them. Ramy does, however, become a better person once he is Islamically engaged to the Sheikh's daughter, and one can see Zainab help Ramy. But on his wedding night, Ramy, yet again, fucks his cousin, and thus Zainab divorces him. In rewatching the video, I notice how I brush over the fact and almost make a joke about what Ramy does to Zainab. The show does not. Rather, Ramy breaks Zainab's heart, and the next morning, he wakes up to a furious Sheikh Ali. Look at the anger in this man's eyes. The Sheikh calls out Ramy's bullshit. He tells them that he never faces his problems or takes responsibility for his actions.
What if it's a chance? A chance to take responsibility for your actions instead of making excuses.
For example, the man who Dennis beat to near death is dead. And it's on Ramy. That Ramy hurts people and is walking a very destructive path.
You, Ramy. Fuck you! You little fuck! You hurt people! You're dangerous.
Finally, that Ramy is outside the bounds of the Sheikh's help, and so he breaks the relationship.
Humility. Humility is understanding when something is beyond your capacity.
Before I call Oddnon, I have to say this form of seeking community differs from real life because the show wants to get personal between Ramy and the Sheikh as Ramy becomes the Sheikh's student. This is not always the case with Muslims in North America, as some seek the community because they are in a foreign land and the mosque becomes a safe haven. However, I've seen people who were very distant from the community return because their life got rough. And out of a kind of desperation, they seek Allah and the righteous path in hopes that their life gets better. Like Ramy to an extent, these Muslims are using Islam as a kind of excuse to become better people. But where the issue stems from is that it's not often sincere and they do not really face their inner demon. Finally, the Muslim community itself is different from how it's depicted in the show because at some level people are excluded for not being Muslim enough. These people are referred to as fake Muslims, and there is a very traditional Muslim gaze that glares at people. And if we strip that general layer that excludes people inside the community, there are divisions between the Syrians, Lebanese, the people from Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, West Africa, the people from Pakistan and South Asia. On top of these divisions, there is the gaze the elderly Muslims have towards the youth, and the expectation as the youth are supposedly destined to carry on the community, and if they do not, they are failures. There's also the issue of acceptance of different people who do not fit in the traditional mold, such as LGBTQ plus Muslims. Thus, to a level, to some Muslims, the mosque is not a safe haven or a safe place, and there are fractures within the community which leads to some Muslims to live a life of alienation. The life of alienation is perfectly illustrated in the 3rd season of Ramy. In this part, I talk about how Ramy uses religion. What do you think about that? And I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think he uses religion as a scale. I mean, we kind of talked about this, but not here, but independently, about how he kind of uses it in a reactionary manner. He uses it as like a panacea, as a cure-all. He thinks that he's gonna start, praying and, going to masjid and, going halal and all these things, getting married before having sex and all this stuff. He thinks that all of these things are going to just magically turn his life around and he'll have some direction and purpose. And it's just, not the case.
Do you think Ramy uses religion like how people use juices?
Juices?
Yeah, juices. We can't say.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I think he gets that sip.
Yeah.
Of salvation, just like anybody starting a new habit to improve their lives. You immediately go into like, yeah, I feel so good, and this is totally helping, and it might be, but then you inevitably, if you don't do the steps required to stick with it, you're gonna either stop doing it or backslide.
Yeah, it's almost like self-help, but the Islamic version.
Kinda, yeah.
And this makes me wonder if there are like Muslim Jordan Petersons out there who are like, these are the 12 rules for a halal life.
100%.
I laugh, but it's probably real. Like that.
Oh no, I know for a fact it's real.
Yeah, we'll save this for another video on Tate. I don't know if I want to poison this one.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for this section is, why do you think Muslim viewers resonate with Ramy? Like, what's it about him that connects people to him? And this could also be like non-Muslims too, because I think it's not just Muslim viewers who get Ramy,
I think this is going to sound really generic, but I think it's because Ramy really does cover a lot of what Muslims in the West deal with, what a lot of ex-Muslims in the West deal with, and I think it addresses them pretty directly.
Yeah.
With the scene with that Chloe girl, checking the condom and things like that. With, I think, even Arabs that moved here that were not Muslim, or like me.
Yeah.
If they just really viscerally and directly show a lot of those, they very viscerally and directly show a lot of those struggles that not a lot of people talk about, number one. And then number two, it's, I don't want to say universal, but it pretty well is. I feel like if you're a younger Muslim or younger Arab, you've probably dealt with a lot of these things before. There's never really been any media that takes such a genuine look at a lot of these different things, the way that Western society sort of allows you to exist, but at the same point, like, others you in a way that is, alienating. It's alienating.
Yeah. That is the next chapter, the next part, alienation.
Yeah.
The alienation of man thus appeared as the fundamental evil of capitalist society.
There are different forms of alienation. One can be alienated from their community, their society, and family. But there is also self-alienation, an alienation from one's culture, one's language, one's family, and one's friends. And soon the world becomes filled with strangers. This kind of alienation is what I refer to as severance. Or a severing of one's relations to people ways of life, and other beings. Ramy Season 3 tells a story of a severed Ramy who has alienated himself from his religion, from his community, from his white and Muslim friends.
Wayla is kind and fun, and she thinks about people other than herself.
But also from his family. In being severed from his support network, Ramy falls deeper into a hole of despair and the black spots on his heart that he was so desperate to clean now cover his heart. For a variety of reasons, Ramy quits working with his uncle and starts his own jewelry business. The main reason why he pursues such a career is to pay off the dowry from his divorce.
Akhi, Sister Malika is noting that when you signed your marriage contract, there was a meher in place. Payment.
Her $100,000, like now. Basura.
But also because he has been conditioned to believe that having more wealth means that he is a successful person. However, to sell his expensive golden engagement rings and necklaces and to become successful in New York's Diamond District, Ramy has to attain gold, and getting gold is almost never an ethical procedure. Thus, to attain this gold, Ramy seeks out the Jewish community of New York.
Almost 1 million followers, and soon we won't even be able to keep up with orders. If we had just the access to your suppliers, we could do something really special, you know?
But the show does not give in to the anti-Semitic belief that the Jews control everything. But rather, these Jewish people have access to gold in occupied Palestine.
Habibi, it is all the Palestinian side. The Palestinian side. All of it is all Palestine.
They are Zionists, who are pro-Israeli occupation and believe they have every right to rob Palestine of its gold because of the Zionist belief that all of Palestine belongs to the Jewish people. To demonstrate how apathetic Ramy has become, the show has Ramy working with Zionists as he travels to occupied Palestine to make a deal. In Palestine, Ramy witnesses the wall and the privilege that his American passport gives him. He meets a woman through Tinder, and they end up chatting about how Gaza is an open-air prison. However, on his way back to the meeting, a Palestinian boy robs Ramy's passport, and Ramy goes to the IDF, causing them to intervene and arrest the boy. This moment gives Ramy pause, as the Palestinian kid's fate is up in the air. In writing this, I had a kind of amnesia of how real the show gets when Ramy travels to Palestine as Ramy Youssef, the director, slides in an IDF raid.
We've trained by your people. The NYPD come here every year to train us.
The IDF take the robbing of Ramy's jacket as a terrorist attack on an American citizen, and the viewer is forced to watch a reality that happens every day in occupied Palestine. I don't even have words to explain it, and I'd rather just show you a clip. However, Ramy is told by the Zionist lady that the boy will be fine and goes through the deal, acquiring Palestinian gold, so he can make a ton of blood money. Once this happens and Ramy returns to America, the show pivots away from Ramy and showcases Ramy's isolation by focusing on his family. It's here where the viewer gets a fabulous episode on Dina, an episode on Farouk in Egypt, and a few episodes on the parents' struggles.
I want to help with the house payments, and I'm trying to talk to Dad, and he's just not.
مش هاخد منك ولا مليم من فلوسك الوسخة.
From the time we do spend with Ramy, we see him continuously try to avoid his problems and try to nestle in a state of alienation. There are two moments where Ramy is forced to face his problems. The first is when the dog he was meant to take care of passes away and he has to tell the owner, who is the imprisoned convert. It's here where Ramy learns that he has a daughter and her mother is Zainab.
With her a few times, mashallah, she's got your smile. Look, I keep looking at this photo, man. She looks just like you. Look at this. Adorable. Look, she even has your hair, huh?
The second is the realization that the Zionist lady lied to him, and the Palestinian boy is still missing and is in captivity.
What is this?
Khalid's case was one of the most shocking ones. He was arrested under completely false circumstances.
He's still arrested now? Like they have him now arrested?
They've held him under the charge of robbery. No one even knows what he stole.
Fucked up. There's a fucking mistake, and
This makes Ramy question what he has been doing, and in the final moments of the season, he loses a precious watch he was supposed to sell. Ramy sees this as an act of God, an act of Allah, and he donates everything he's made to help the Palestinian boy. The final moments of the season, the viewer sees Ramy pray for the first time in season 3, as Ramy returns to God, to Allah.
Allahu Akbar!
Now, what can we make out of all of this? First, to some Muslims, the solution to having a complex Muslim identity is isolation, or more accurately, it is severance. To be at peace, some Muslims sever themselves from the religious community, from their religious friends or family, and isolate themselves. Why? Well, these places can be very judgy, and the continuous question reappears. Questions such as, what kind of Muslim am I? Am I living a haram or a halal life? These questions can be a bit too much. Ramy Season 3 definitely showcases this, but in being fully severed from one's community and support network comes at a dire cost, because there is a risk that this severance leads to apathy. This is not to say that Muslims who have left Islam or a-religious folks are in the wrong either. You do not need to be a Muslim or a Christian to have morals or to be a good person. In the initial script, I kind of just say this and cite Hurman Sen. But I think we should pause for a moment and rip this idea apart. Also, this is not exclusive to Muslims, as I'm 100% sure Christians who say yes to Jesus and accept his love are the same and see things the same way too. Traditional Muslims who are on the straight path sometimes do see themselves as superior to ex-Muslims, to Muslims who are in doubt or are still figuring things out, to atheists or agnostics, and meeting such Muslims freaking sucks. It does. I tend to remind these people that they are not superior and that people can believe in whatever they choose because Islam itself carries that acceptance. Example, one of the first migrations that the Muslims did was to the kingdom of Abyssinia, where they met the Christian king Al-Najashi. Yeah, Christians and Jewish people are seen as people of the book by Muslims, but the Muslims were fine with the king of Abyssinia and his beliefs and the beliefs his people held. So if early Muslims were fine with others who had different beliefs, Muslims today should not be so uptight. This uptightness only causes further divisions and causes one to be apathetic. Rather, in severing oneself from Islam and becoming apathetic, the person may longer care about other Muslims or other people. This lack of care or empathy may bleed into a total lack of relationality to others, which may then lead some people down some dark paths. For an example, Ramy's isolation leads him to make a deal with Zionists in order to make more wealth. But this wealth stems from stolen, occupied land. In being apathetic and focused on making more money, Ramy goes through with the deal even though he knows it is wrong. What gives him pause, however, is seeing the community do activism, and it is them who inform him that the Palestinian boy is still missing or in captivity. Thus, people who sever themselves from everything for a bit of peace end up ignoring the problems of the world around them and the negative impacts they may be causing. Finally, there's also the risk that if one severs themselves from both the Muslim community and white society, they will end up living lonely lives. Now, this isn't exactly a perfect dichotomic choice between living in community with Muslims or living in community with white people, because there is always an alternative. Furthermore, it seems as though the TV show Ramy doesn't actually answer the video's questions, because season 3 ends with Ramy praying, and one may assume he returned to Allah, to the halal path, and back to the Muslim community. But this is Ramy, and anything can happen in season 4. We might find out that he fucked a... Predictions aside, I think there is a need to go beyond Ramy. And maybe Adnan has an answer to my questions. Or maybe he doesn't. What are your thoughts about alienating yourself or oneself from the Muslim community?
I mean...
Or to phrase it better, what's alienating? What alienates people from the Muslim community? And this could be, this could be Muslims, ex-Muslims, LGBTQ plus Muslims,
There's very much like a... I can try to answer it both ways. I think they're both important. Is Muslims are, if you are not somebody who was part of their community, and this is not, a catch-all for all Muslims or anything like that. But if you're somebody that's not in their community, they are incredibly kind and welcoming and warm and friendly. It's when you're part of the community and you leave the community for whatever reason. It's not that it gets violent or cruel or mean or bad, but there is like kind of a big stigma about it, where if you feel you need to explore, you need to sort of figure things out for yourself and then come back.
Yeah.
It's sort of like this, like you abandoned them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, in my opinion, to separate the Muslim component of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I think when you're community building, I think having access to practicing and being with others that are of your religion are important.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it should be the focus of what the community is about, because by that nature, you're alienating large groups of your own people.
Yeah.
There are Christian Arabs, there are, all kinds.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think focusing the community more on the people that live within it rather than the people that fit this, very specific definition would go a long way into, outreach and to, I don't want to say build our ranks because that sounds like really nefarious, but just building a tighter knit community.
Yeah.
I left the faith when I was relatively young. And I was in and out and in and out and in and out until I was about 18.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of separated from it. And for a while, that basically cut me off.
Yeah.
From a lot of... I was always welcome back, but there was always this very specific feeling of well, when are you going to leave again? As opposed to just letting me exist. Yeah. Let me just be here. Let me figure it out. Let me feel out how I want to approach this,
If there's one thing the TV show Ramy doesn't fully touch on, is how alienating and jarring conservative Muslims can be. These Muslims are usually pro-capital and seem to be completely oblivious to their role in a settler colonial state, such as Canada and the United States. Yes, many Muslims who arrive onto these shores were immigrants fleeing war. But as researchers have uncovered, many of these immigrants are hand-selected by the state because they may have economic value. Although the state has a role to play in this process, migrants do travel and risk everything in hopes that they may one day attain the American dream. To an extent, Ramy also deconstructs the illusion of the American dream, as we see Farouk, who once had a stable salaryman job, and the hope he once had dwindles.
Dad. What's going on?
I lost my job, Ramy.
We're in America, Mesa. We're visitors.
We're visitors. Yeah. We've been here for 35 years, Farouk.
However, Ramy never makes the acknowledgement that Muslims have settled on indigenous lands, and this is an acknowledgement many Muslims living in North America omit because as a minority, they have been targeted by the state and the white settler society. Furthermore, to fit in to the white settler society, many Muslims lean towards conservatism to align their beliefs with white people. For an example, Muslims and Christians team up when it comes to LGBTQ+ rights and have publicly taken a stance that is both homophobic and transphobic. On the other hand, in many Friday prayers, the Sheikh may give a sermon about oppression and yet never touch on how capitalists in the Middle East, or the Muslim world, or North America, or the West are oppressing their people and their workers. Rather, wealth is something that is praised, for it means one is successful, and some Muslims hold the readings that wealth is something that is fated or written by Allah, that the wealthy are only wealthy because Allah granted them that wealth. And the poor, oh the poor, they were fated to be poor and must be eternally grateful for what they have. Finally, in respect to conservative Muslims, many are obsessed with the nitty-gritty aspects of the religion. Ramy actually shows this obsession in the first 3 minutes of the show as the grumpy old man gets angry at Ramy because he did not wash in between his toes. The man then rips Ramy's socks off and scrubs his toes. A lot of this obsession is focused on purity, and if another Muslim is walking the haram path, these Muslims must intervene to correct it. You swear you must purify your mouth. You drink. You don't pray 5 times a day. Well, then you are a kafar. You watch anime. You are watching the devil. You don't wear hijab. You're instantly marked as not a proper Muslim. You're not wearing modest clothing. How dare you? You aren't Sunni. Then you are othered by the majority. You don't have a beard. Well, then you aren't following the Prophet's path.
Be like our Prophet.
Every little detail is judged by Muslims. But one can step further. For example, I stand up whenever somebody around me is being homophobic or transphobic. However, many Muslims rip their masks off when they're alone, but others are openly transphobic, like this person.
God, look what's happening. A man can wake up and say, I'm a woman, and a woman say, I'm a man. Literally, your child can tell, listen, I'm a donkey, and respect my choice.
To go against the transphobia, the homophobia, in itself is frowned upon by these conservative traditional Muslims. And over the years, these messages jarred me and have made me seek out a leftist form of Islam. At first I thought it wasn't a thing, but I was proven wrong as scholars years ago have written about how Islam and leftist ideas mesh together. The existence of a leftist Islam may surprise some folk, as the most familiar form of Islam is the one mainstream media peddles. And this familiar Islam is one that is angry, hateful, has conservative values, and is queer-phobic. The leftist form of Islam is not, however, something that originates in the current era, but rather leftist ideas have been a part of the religion since its inception. This was something I was reminded by Lady Izdihar, who pointed this out, and I love it. Side note, Lady Izdihar has been getting some hate, so I highly recommend y'all to go and show her some love. So, I make this note because to say that people now have started to evolve Islam would be wrong. For an example, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, initially spread his message to the poor in Mecca, as they were the ones who were thrown away and shunned by Arab society. The practice of zakah was implemented to tax the extremely wealthy so that there was a social security net for the poor. Go to any mosque and you'll find a sadaqah box to help those in need. Go to any Friday prayer. Do it. Everyone is welcome. And witness how leaders of the community organize their people to gather funds to aid people in need. What we now call leftist ideas are baked into the religion, and yet you still don't believe me. Or do you? Here's another example. The Prophet stood for the oppressed, and any Muslim who currently are not standing for and with oppressed people are arguably not following the Prophet's path. For the path of the Prophet is one of empathy.
Now we as Muslims or as believers, we have responsibilities and duties to stand shoulder to shoulder with the oppressed. We need to show solidarity with them.
And the thing the Muslim community loves to do best is to isolate itself from the ajanib.
If you fold your arms and do nothing when it comes to the plight of the oppressed, then you are also regarded as an oppressor according to the teachings of Islam.
Rather, they should be building bridges of empathy to other peoples and working in tandem to help build a better society that is free of oppression, free of capitalist greed, and one that is liberated. In my perspective, to go beyond Ramy means creating a new positive Muslim community that not only has leftist ideas, but takes action. This new community I propose has to be inclusive, so that it may help Muslims who are lost, Muslims who are jarred by the toxic conservatives, and it's a community that makes people feel like they belong. It has to be a community that stands against toxic Muslims who are filled with hate, and a community that stands for and beside those who are marginalized and oppressed. That's my call to action for this video. But any Muslim person out there who is currently feeling lost and searching for an answer for how to merely exist in between both worlds, I'm sorry to say that I don't have a concrete answer for you. To assimilate is not the answer, as you'll become white and feel out of place in your Muslim or Arab community. You might even start to believe some of the crap Jordan Peterson, Dave Harris, and Ben Shapiro say about Islam. That Islam cannot coexist in the so-called West. But let me tell you a secret. Come here. Closer. No. Closer. We were here before 9/11, before America bombed Japan, before Jordan Peterson was born, before Ben Shapiro was born, before Dave Harris came into being. And we are here far before anyone dared to call us terrorists.
Are you a terrorist?
The thing that alienates Muslims is not our religion, but rather how communities were formed and fostered in the Middle East. Muslims come here and feel alone, and this loneliness guides some to the mosque, and their religious identity becomes stronger due to being in a new community. The other option? Be Muslim. Do it. Carry it with pride and raise your head high. And never change your name because some white person couldn't say it right. However, do not remain in the safe bubble that is the Muslim community. Because if you do, some teachings will be ingrained in your mind and will forever stick. The first verse that came down to the Prophet was Iqra, read, learn new things, meet new people, and grow beyond Islam. Or include what you learned to your Islam. Be kind to other people, be kind to yourself. And if there's anything I've learned from the TV show Ramy, it's don't run from your problems. Don't run from your inner demons. Face them. Become a better person. And clean your heart from those black spots. Don't be apathetic. Be empathetic. So, if Ramy doesn't provide an answer to my question, which is, should Muslims living in the West embrace the difference and assimilate, or should they stand apart and be Muslim? Right, that's the question. But on the side, is there an alternative to this dichotomic question? Do you think you could answer this question and take a stab at it?
I think there should be a little bit of both. I don't think assimilation is the way to go, but there is like a sort of, cultural give and take that happens. I think the larger issue is that the West tends to encroach and enforce its culture more harshly than the Muslim community in the States. I think that being in the West, understanding you're in the West, there's going to be cultural differences, and that's fine. But I don't think that means that you need to shed your identity in order to be a part of it. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think assimilation is often seen as, because this is the way we're expected to do it, is to, dress like everybody. You can have your beliefs, but like, you dress like everybody. You're not wearing, full veil if that's your, choice. You know, there's I even struggle to say it. I just think both are true.
Yeah.
I just think the West needs to chill on, the Christofascism.
Yeah, 100%.
Because like without that, think about it. Without that component, what is the question even? Like if that stuff wasn't happening, they don't really cause a ruckus. Like we don't really cause a ruckus. So there's really no encroaching on our part. We're very much, keep your head down, mind your business type people. It's with very, 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 very little exception. We don't so much as make a peep, so I really think it kind of falls on the West.
Yeah, no, that makes sense
in a lot of ways.
I think for me, because this question isn't a very good question. I think we talked about that. You can't be either or. Like, I mean, it's possible, but at the same time, you can't just give up your Muslim identity. For like at some level, it's going to be ingrained inside of you, and as white as you try to be, you can't. Like, there's going to be something that you cannot, or something that will distinguish you as different from white people, But then on the same time, like, should you be Muslim? Like, what does that mean? Right? Like, does it mean to be 100% in community with Muslims? Right? Like that's not a good option. In my view, that's not a great option either. Right? And so what I try to pick apart in the final chapter, Beyond Ramy, is kind of being like, yeah, Muslims can be in the West, but at the same time, we are also taught a lot of the norms that Western people are taught. Like not Western, but like Christian people are taught. Like there's a conservativeness that is ingrained in Muslim teachings that people just absorb and don't question. Like for example, my video on homophobia. For a lot of Muslims, being gay is haram. No question. If you question it, like, how dare you? How dare you go against the Prophet's word? And it's ingrained in the mind to a degree where it's like they are teaming up with Christian fascists. Right?
Yes.
And so for me, it's like, yeah, they could be Muslim, but at the same time, that conservative value is being passed on to them. And what they're doing, like what Muslims do in the West, is to play by the system, get in favor with the system, to have capital and to have prosperity. Like, in my opinion, and then it kind of plays into the norm of wealth. And I talk about this a little bit in this chapter, where it's like, if you're super wealthy, that's your fate. It's maktub. You were written to be wealthy. Like, it's not a bad thing that you're a billionaire or a millionaire, right? And that poor person you're seeing every day in the street, they deserve to be poor. They are fated. They are maktub to be poor. And Muslims have this idea ingrained in their mind. And they get super wealthy and they become part of the system. They get accepted in the corporate culture. And then they use their Islam to justify their position in society. Right? And this positionality then gets used to drive on the gears of capitalism. And it's like, it's very complex, very, very nuanced, right? Like if you think about it, and if you go into, and this is kind of why I want to do a lot more research into American mosques and how they differ from Canada, because in my opinion, like I was wondering and questioning if it's different in the States, if there are mosques in the States that have incorporated leftist ideas, right? Because like I call it new in my chapter, where I'm like, hey, let's make a new thing here, where it's like a leftist Muslim community. That is exactly what you said it should be. Well, you didn't really say a leftist community, but like a inclusive community that's not really about the nitty gritty faith stuff, right? It's not about how good of a Muslim you are. It's about organizing, helping, building community, um, doing shit, you know?
Yeah, getting out in the community, finding the community's needs, and
And then also like linking up.
addressing them directly. All that stuff is in the
Yeah.
Quran too, which is so funny to me with Makhtub, is because like that's in there too, but like it doesn't stand to reason. It doesn't stand to reason because so much of the teachings is about empathy, and I mean, there's such a strong anarchist background in Arab culture, and I find it so interesting that and I'm sure we can get into a billion different ways in which the culture shifted, because it's not even worth getting into, but if I were to go back in the faith, which is not on the table for me, but if I were to find a community of Muslims that are, getting out there, advocating for, positive political change, doing mutual aid, getting in their communities, servicing their communities, protecting their communities, it would be so much more wholesome for everyone involved. Even Dearborn isn't like that. Dearborn has one of the largest Arabic populations in the world outside of the Middle East. And it's a wonderful place to be. It's super chill. Everyone's great. And it's like stepping into, it's like stepping into the Middle East in some ways. You have billboards in Arabi and all this kind of stuff. And, but at the same time, everyone is still so alienated from each other. You have factions of elders or sort of de facto like community leaders, and I haven't been out there in a very long time, but I had never heard of them getting out and doing these types of things. It's more to do with, city ordinances and things like that, which, is positive in its own way, but I would love to see, some sort of mutual aid, centering the community.
We should talk about something fun now. Okay, here's a good question. Have you ever played like a Arab Muslim video game?
No, is there such a thing?
Probably.
Like I mean,
imagine Solid Snake as a Arab with a beard, and he talks in Arabic.
Salamu alaikum.
Salamu alaikum, Colonel. What's the mission?
Salam alaikum. Alaikum assalam. Salam alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam.
For the longest time, I didn't know how to end this video. But it's 4 a.m., and in these late hours, God has given me wisdom. Let me end this video by telling you a story. And it will be just like foreign stories. I have no memory of 9/11. I don't remember being in school. I don't remember my teacher wheeling in a TV. I don't remember the news. I don't remember the waves of grief, of sorrow and anger. I don't remember my parents reacting and telling us to act white. Or any of my siblings telling me what happened. All I can remember is a phone call. It was my dad. He called from a payphone to tell us he was trapped in an airport. I was on an island at the time, isolated from the world. I was across the continent. Did the white gaze touch me? Perhaps. But I lived on that island months after 9/11, and I do not recall a change. Until high school, I was in a cocoon of isolation, as when we did move to the frozen plains, I was placed in a shady Islamic private school. In the school, I grew up and learned amongst kids from Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Saudi Arabia. We were all Muslim, and thus I learned in a space far away from the white gaze, except for the white teachers, but they were actually quite cool and open. Then I went to a white or a multicultural high school, and I met an Egyptian with an afro. I would soon learn he was Coptic, but even if he was Christian, we bonded, and to this day, he is my best friend. No, my brother.
Brother.
It was here in high school where I began to feel out of place. To this day, I remember being asked by a white classmate if I was a homophobe. So it was here where I first felt that white gaze, and I began to mask myself. The white teachers could never say my name, so I became Abraham. But I made it through and was still a practicing Muslim, though I did have doubts. I then entered university, and sure did I notice how many white people were around me. It was here where I severed myself from Islam and alienated myself. When I entered the Faculty of Education, I further noticed that the majority were white Christians. I was probably the youngest and the only Arab in my class. When I taught in schools, I felt that white gaze from my own students. And when I would apply to schools, I noticed how white the teaching roster was, and the environment of teaching in a white majority school set me off. Wherever I went, I felt out of place. I never felt like myself either because of the mask I had on. At some point, I had enough, and as I traveled from school to school as a substitute, I would write my name in Arabic and get a good laugh at how shocked the students would get. Now in my video about Muslims and homophobia, I nonchalantly say that I don't care about religion. That was a lie. I might have tried to sever myself in the past, but being Muslim is part of my identity. And in stages of my life, I was rather apathetic, and I continuously ignored the Middle East's long history with communism. The truth is, it's a history that I am currently learning, as the Red Star once shined over Iraq, and there were parts of the USSR where Islam and communism coexisted. Lady Izdihar talks about this at length in this video and in others. Some see religion as this bad thing that contradicts leftist ideas. But I think we should be asking a different question, one that Ramy does address. Is it the religion that is bad, or is it the people who interpret it? Thus, this video loops back to Snake, to words, to new meanings, to new paths, and to new found futures.
Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name and your own future.
Decide for myself?
And whatever you choose will be you.
I don't know if I can.
Wowee! This was a long one. An hour and 40 minutes. How? if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then you must. It's right there somewhere. I first want to throw a big thank you to my Patreons. And there are only 2 of you, Infernal Ramblings and Strata? I don't know how to say that. Getting $6.66 this month was worth it. And if you enjoy my work and you want to help me out, my Patreon is linked below. This was a 2 months project, and I put a lot of hours into research, recording, re-recording, and editing. Finally, I want to throw a big, huge thank you to Oddnon or Oddnon. Oddnon helped me out, brainstorm ideas, and went over the script with me, which was why there were edits all over the place, because like I'd send him clips of the video and he'd be like, that's iffy. Anyways, his Twitch is here and it's linked below in the description. Thank you to the Silver Samaritan for aiding me your voice and jumping on a late night thought. Your Karl Marx impression was amazing, and I was about to use the 3rd take because it was so damn funny, but I settled on the 2nd because, you gotta have that serious tone.
The alienation of man thus appeared as the fundamental evil of capitalist society.
Finally, thank you to Maddie Merlin. I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, then wow. I suck with names. For aiding me a white gaze and helping me create that meme for this video. All in all, welcome to 2023, and Lost Futures is back, baby. Let's go! Let's go. The words to explain it. No. Fuck. Wowee! Is that good? I think that is. If you've made it this far, how do I record?